people have been on this. People have been on the debt problem for ages. People like the Ron Pauls of the world try to make a run at the presidency, in 2008. That didn't pan out. People really haven't seen it as a huge issue. But now the hot button topics for this election are twofold. It's immigration, number one, and inflation, number two. That's what people are most concerned about. And I think yesterday, we're at a tipping point in this country where more people recognize the problem. And so more people are trying to figure out what on earth is causing it. The greedy corporations narrative is dead. It's so dead, it's not even funny, because Kamala Harris is running her campaign around the Elizabeth Warren strategy of blaming companies for inflation and saying that price gouging is what's causing inflation. Donald Trump is leading her by 9.9% in the polls on Polymarket as of today. Those are not polls. Obviously, it's a betting market. But I tend to think because money is on the line and it's not just humans being asked, actual capital is up for grabs, and this is a multi-billion-dollar market. I tend to believe Polymarket than I believe the polls, which Trump is also leading in. He's leading in every swing state, and he is not talking about ending price gouging. He's spoken a few times about the debt problem. So people are coming around to this. He's now the leading candidate. And so as this problem becomes worse, people naturally want to figure out what is actually going on. Price controls do not work. They never work. We've seen it with the minimum wage. When minimum wage laws are enacted, very quickly, people become priced out of rents, food prices get more expensive, etc. So if you start setting the price that grocery stores can charge, then that problem is only exacerbated and inflation is worsened. It does nothing to fix your purchasing power. People are now, as a problem gets so bad, people want to know the root cause, and people are discovering the root cause as our accelerating debt burden. If you take a look at just a linear chart of the total national debt, and you go back all the way to the 60s and 70s, and you look at it today, our rate of debt issuance is increasing. Just 10 years ago, this time that I'm speaking to you now, the national debt was at $17.5 trillion. It's at $35.6 trillion. So it has literally doubled in a decade. And at the first day of the fiscal year, or the first week of the fiscal year, we had a $354 billion net increase in the national debt. That's insane. That's very insane. And now our interest expense is the second to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. These unfunded liabilities is the second biggest line item on the United States Treasury's expense sheet. It's now higher than the national defense spending. And so when you go to your neighbor and you say, hey, did you know that we're spending more on the interest on our national debt than we are on our military? That's kind of a big eye opener. Most people get extremely shocked by, because you'd think that the United States, with the world's biggest and strongest military might, would be spending most of what it earns on fortifying that and building that and maintaining it. But we're actually just paying off our creditors is what we're doing, because rates have been so high for so long. And as a result of that, what we're doing is we're increasing the rate of debt issuance. That's accelerating in order to pay down our debt. And so this issue has become not catastrophic, but it is approaching catastrophic level, because that's what we're doing. As auction sizes get bigger, people can only buy so many U.S. treasuries. And so then the marginal buyer will have to become the Federal Reserve, and all money, an increasing amount of the money that goes to buy the national debt, will be freshly printed money. And so not only will the U.S. government be spending money into the real economy, driving prices higher, but the Federal Reserve will be printing new money in order to buy that debt. So that's what's happening. That's what's going on. It's becoming a catastrophic problem. We're not there yet, but the problem is accelerating. As it gets worse, people are searching for the root causes instead of just lazily blaming corporations and price gouging and any number of empty platitudes that these politicians like Elizabeth Warren have trotted out in front of us. So I think that there will always be non-playable characters who will blame price gouging and will blame the rich people and will blame the billionaires. We've seen what happens when you try to tax the rich. Norway lost $500 million last year because they raised their wealth tax. People left the country. They were expecting a $143 million increase in their tax revenue. They got a net $443 million loss in their tax revenue. So taxing the rich isn't a solution. The only solution is austerity. And that may mean recession, but it's one that we're going to have to weather. And because the Fed has like a no recession mandate, it doesn't want recession to occur under any circumstances, and it will widen the money printer out as wide as it needs to go in order to avert one. I think the fiat endgame is just a melt up in the debt load, a collapse in the value of the United States dollar, which is accelerating. And then people flooding into things like Bitcoin, because as people see the price continually rises even after it dies, right? There have been thousands of Bitcoin obituaries through the years. They're going to look toward things like gold to hedge their bets. They're going to look at things to Bitcoin that cannot be diluted to hedge their bets. So I think to answer your question, like when does the normie wake up? I think that the normal person wakes up once we start raising taxes even more than we already do. Right now, we're paying something like $10,000 a year in property tax for the home that I'm in now. It's insane. It's getting really bad. They're increasing it. And we're increasing it because there's more government spending going on. We're now building migrant shelters and housing specifically for migrants in this suburban Massachusetts town. And that has to get funded with taxpayer money. So as taxes increase, as grocery prices increase, people are going to look to what is the actual root cause. And the root cause is reckless government spending and money printing. And the solution, time and again, is Bitcoin. So we just have to keep banging the drum that Bitcoin is the life raft. People understand and know the problem over time. As it gets worse, you and I just have to keep doing our part about drawing people into Bitcoin and helping them recognize it as the solution to their problem. Because now the Federal Reserve, obviously it has this dual mandate. Everybody knows it's full employment and stable prices, and they oscillate between the two. When the labor market is loosening, when it's unwinding, layoffs are elevated, they lower rates at the cost of raising inflation. And then inflation gets above target and then they raise rates. So it's this constant trade-off. The idea that humans can effectively set the price of money is a foolish one. And it's proven time and again that all it leads to is an increase in the overall price level. We'll look back 200 years from now and look at the idea of targeting a rate of monetary debasement at 2% every year as barbaric and anti-human. And I think because the third mandate of the United States Federal Reserve is to avoid recession at all costs and to make sure that financial assets always go up so that consumers can continue consuming. That will lead to a continued melt up in the CPI, continued melt up in asset prices, and the asset price that can't be created out of thin air like a stock certificate can is Bitcoin. So yeah, that's where my head is at. I don't think we'll get a deflationary bust because we live in a global credit system. People need to continually borrowing and spending, and lending needs to chug along, and deflation and economic recession are not good for that. So I think it's just we're in for several decades of really bad price inflation and economic expansion. GDP will continue being positive, but people will feel increasingly destitute, spending more and more on credit cards and having less savings in the bank. I think that's the way that we're headed, as opposed to a deflationary bust and an economic recession. Because if we have a sustained recession, the global credit system collapses. If people stop consuming and spending and borrowing, then that's what happens. So we need to keep diluting the money in order to make that happen. Rates need to stay low in order to make that happen. Capital allocation is going to grow more inefficient, and the world around us is going to continue moving toward people feeling destitute. And as a result, it'll drive more people to Bitcoin over time.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.